7 years ago, and the transplant was due to a hereditary disease that runs in my family. It's called hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. So
Oh,
yeah, it's a mouthful. We call it HHT for short.
okay. Thank goodness for acronyms in this world. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So it's essentially a blood vessel malformation disorder. And this affected my mom when she was in her early 50s. In 2004, my mom had her first liver transplant. And I didn't realize at the time that I would be affected by this so early in life. I thought if it did affect me, it would maybe be down the road when I was maybe my mom's age. Just about 7 years after that, after my mom's transplant, I started having my first symptoms of liver failure. And that was in my early 20s. And I battled the illness until I was 29 when I had my liver transplant. So I'm super grateful to be alive, to have a second chance. And it was upon waking from my transplant when I felt this urge to live with more intention and to give back to this cause that saved my life. So that's what's brought me here, literally to this moment today, is finding other ways to promote the cause and share my love of life and movement with others. So thank you for having me here, Zach, and allowing this opportunity to talk about all things movement and being grateful for life.
Yeah, so two follow-up questions. So first is like, so when you woke up, I mean, was it kind of instantaneous that you had this like sort of clear overriding sensation, or was it a few hours later? Like, because I'm always fascinated by that really key moment that we have
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes as recipients, powerful realizations, whether we can articulate them or not, about what we want to do next. I mean, can you walk us through that moment a little bit?
Yeah. So before my transplant, I quite honestly was depressed, and I, didn't know if I was going to survive, didn't know what I had to look forward to or not. And the moment I came to, I felt different, and I knew right away that
Okay.
yeah, I knew right away that there was something that had shifted in me, and I didn't know how I was going to move forward in life, but I knew it was going to be with more gratitude and, as I said, more intention to live fully. And it was maybe just a couple days after that, a volunteer came into my room as I was recovering and handed me a brochure that was about the World Transplant Games, and that's kind of like it was perfect timing. Really, that was sort of the spark that got me thinking, well, this is a great opportunity for me to get back into the water and back to swimming, a sport that I had always loved. And that was really the moment that was a turning point for me to get back in the water and focus and prioritize on my health and fitness.
Awesome. Yeah, you just knew. Like there was no, you didn't need any definition. You just absolutely knew. Okay, thank you
Mm-mm.
for sharing some of that. So Grace, the same questions for you. Which transplant did you have? What three questions did I ask Jillian? Let me look it up real again. Where are you from? And which transplant did you have, Gray? And walk us through your story as well a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Gray Brett. I live just outside of Toronto in Canada. And in 2015, I had a liver transplant. In 2005, 10 years earlier, I was diagnosed with a progressive, untreatable, and uncurable disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis. And what that does is it narrows the bile ducts that run in and out of the liver, and it essentially chokes off your liver. The liver then starts to get cirrhosis, and it no longer functions. And the end result is that to survive, you need a liver transplant. So I was fortunate enough to get that liver transplant on June 20th of 2015. and it was definitely quite an experience. But coming out on the other end of it, I too kind of had the timing was a little bit different, but I too had a moment while I was in the hospital where I realized that I needed to give back, and I decided that I was going to be better, a better person, a better overall person than I was before my transplant. I wanted to be more active. I wanted to be I just wanted to thrive more. So I focused on doing just that. And so, yeah, those are my answers.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe you can walk us through your timing a little bit, because what I find fascinating when I do the podcast is and it's really important to share, I think, for anyone watching this, is like your individual story is very much your individual story. It doesn't have to follow anyone else's model and so forth. So what was your timing? How did you come to this realization, like, okay, I wanted to be a better version of myself?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because I got very sick very, very quickly. Most people that have my disease, it's a gradual decline, but I was really quite active,
Mm,
and living a full life, symptom free, up until I hit that wall. And so I ended up in the hospital, and within a month and a half, I walked out well, I didn't walk out. I actually left in a wheelchair,
mm,
um, with a new liver, and I didn't expect that. I went from working full time 1 week to being in the hospital, actually waking up in the hospital and not realizing how I got there. And in fact, I got so sick that originally the transplant team came around to assess me to get put on the list, and I was not accepted, because, as we all know, you have to walk this fine line where you have to be sick enough to require the surgery, but strong enough to be able to
yeah,
recover and
yeah,
survive. And I guess they, at that time, were thinking that I was dealing with a number of issues as my body was shutting down, and they denied me on the transplant list. Then a week later, they came back and they reassessed me, and I guess I was still very, very sick, but someone took a caring and kind eye when they looked at me, and then I was accepted onto the waiting list. I shot right to the top, and then within 18 hours, I was in surgery having my first transplant. And so immediately afterwards, the surgery went really, really well. But immediately afterwards, my lungs filled up with
mm,
fluid. And so I was on a ventilator for the following 8 days. And I was heavily sedated because I was fighting the machine, because I guess my natural breathing cadence was much slower than what the
mm,
machine's cadence was. And so my body was resisting. So they had to sedate me. So I essentially was
yeah.
sleeping for
You could,
those days. And I woke up after, when they removed me. I was no longer intubated, and I was I was dealing with a lot of and processing a lot of emotions. I didn't really know what had happened. I was feeling a little bit guilty. I was feeling just overwhelmed by the whole situation, and I was in the ICU still at this point, and there was a person in the intensive care unit who would come around, and he was like a spiritual practitioner, and he would come around, and if you wanted to have a chat with him, you could. If you didn't want to, he'd just move on to the next room. And I really looked forward to these little daily conversations with this
mm,
guy. And I was discussing how I was feeling and the things that I was feeling, and he said to me, really, really interestingly, he said, "You're going to drive yourself nuts if you just continue this little this thought loop that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, like you've survived. You're on the other end of this transplant experience. Like, don't waste it. This is an amazing gift. And I'm like, yeah, but I feel like survivor's guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't even know what to feel. And he said to me, this very put together spiritual practitioner guy, he says to me, he says, listen, and I apologize if I'm not allowed to say this, but this is what he said. He said, listen, Gray, shit happens, and you have to realize that and accept that. And
Mm-hmm.
it was at that moment where I just realized that it doesn't have to be any bigger than that. And it was a bit of a switch as to, okay, now I'm looking forward. I did survive. I went through
Mm.
that stuff. And
Okay.
maybe this stuff is going to happen again. And it most likely will, because I still have my disease. There's still no cure for it, and there's still no treatment for it. So I did get a new liver, but I still have the disease. I imagine at some point down the road, I'll need another one. So I remember that time making that decision to become something bigger than I was before, and to get involved and to give back, and really live my life, and hopefully help other people by living my life. Which none of this was a plan to go to the World Games, to meet people like Jill and end up doing the Move for Life Foundation. It wasn't. It was just following that next step, and one thing led to another. And now I'm sitting here talking to you for the second podcast that we've done together. It's really quite phenomenal.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. What I really find fascinating, I'm thinking to an audience member who might watch this a few months from now. Today's March 20th, 2023. And with Jillian's story, she knew in advance something was coming. Gray's story, he had no idea. And it's an open question. I don't think there is an answer. Which one is better? Which one is worse? So if you're someone now on the waiting list, maybe you have a transplant coming up, whether you know well in advance or today you happen to be healthy and tomorrow you happen to be in a hospital, I think, your story is super fascinating and valid and so forth. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just find it fascinating with you guys being both the guests today, these very opposite side of the spectrum stories, because I've heard a lot of these stories before and I don't have an answer either. I'm like, Gray's case, you were healthy, and so you didn't have this sense, maybe some sense of dread that something was going to happen, but then you had to deal with so many emotional things so quickly. In Jillian's
Mm-hmm.
case, maybe she had emotional time to kind of prepare for this, even though there was this dread. So, which one is better in this situation? I don't know, but I kind of find it fascinating since you guys both laid out your stories. So let's get to the next part of the show, which is you're both coming out of your transplant, super inspired. So what's the impetus then for starting Move for Life Foundation? Because it's just an awesome thing you guys are up to. So maybe I'll start with you, Gray, and then get back to you, Jillian.
Well, we were like good transplant athletes. We were getting ready and thinking about the games that were in Houston, and then finding out that they were eventually canceled. I know that Jill and we had both felt a little bit of a letdown as to what was going on in the world at that point, because everything seemed to be getting smaller and closing down, and the games were no longer something to be looking forward to. And it was at that point that Jill was having thoughts of some open water swimming, and she and I were having a few little conversations about that, and then she, I guess, decided to really take on the idea of crossing Lake Ontario, swimming the crazy distance of 52 kilometers, and it was something that I was interested to be a part of. We did think about swimming it together there for a short period of time, but my health was it wasn't the best at that point. It wasn't reliably good
Yeah.
for training. So Jill kind of took the helm and started working towards that goal. And then I guess the idea of Move for Life kind of came as a result of that goal being set, and how are we going to do this, and if we can come up with something a foundation that is kind of behind this and use that as an event, and we can maybe reach more people. And then as we started those ideas started to snowball, we then kind of came up with our mission statement and what that would be, and what are our key goals for, whether it's like to inspire other people to live healthy lives, to live active lives, all of this. We were just trying to figure out what that all meant. And I think that's kind of the impetus for Move for Life, was really just Jill deciding that she wanted to be a psychopath and swim Lake Ontario.
Yeah, so maybe you want to jump off there. Like, what made you become a psychopath? Gray's words.
Thanks, Gray. Yeah, you said that quite beautifully, and it's essentially how Move for Life was born. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way. Gray beside me, he swam part of the swim with me in the lake, and I think I became a psychopath because I knew that this would draw attention. I knew that this was something unique that I don't think another transplant recipient had done. I like to challenge myself, and that's a big part of it as well. I wanted to prove it to myself and see what I was capable of, and inspire other transplant recipients while I was doing it. And to have the help of Gray and Benoit, Sylvie, Brad, our team has been really like the icing on the cake, because I couldn't have done all of this by myself. It's not all about me. This is a team effort. We're grateful recipients that want to give back and show other recipients, and not just the transplant world, but what is possible after having a transplant, and to really honor your organ donor and live your life to the fullest. And that swim was, for me, it boosted my confidence into the role of where I am in with the Move for Life Foundation, because it felt that I was able to show others what is possible, and I felt that I was able to take charge of these kind of events and show others what they can do physically and mentally as well. It wasn't just a physical challenge. There's a lot of mental fortitude required to do not just that swim, but put on these events. And yeah, that's essentially.
Thanks. Yeah, what I'm really fascinated with, and we as a group, World Transplant Athletes, are recipient-led organizations. And so when you said you wanted to do the swim with the team of people behind you, Gray, and I forgot the Sophie, and you mentioned 3 other people. I didn't write their names down. You know, all the other people behind the scenes who were helping you, because it was obvious watching it from afar, like what a team effort this was, and you were the tip of the iceberg getting across the water. Now, if you think about being a recipient and leading by example, how does that, do you think, help infuse the organization's purpose and ability to talk to people? Because in the end, you're really trying to get more people transplants quicker, it sounds like. So Jillian, maybe you can start with this part of the question. You can start answering first this time, and then we'll go to Gray.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, I know, I got lost in my another commentary. So how does being a recipient infuse the organization's purpose and mission, and your ability to interact with others as you're trying to get more traction for the organization?
Okay, so if I understood that correctly, being a recipient, I feel, and maybe this is just me, but I feel that being a recipient doesn't mean you're less than or less capable. And I think that being part of the Move for Life Foundation and being a recipient and creating something like this just further shows our strengths, what's possible after transplant. And I think setting an example as a recipient to others, I think I think that's inspiring. And I will admit one of the first people that really inspired me in the swimming world was another recipient. And seeing this person at the transplant games performing really well made me feel like I can do that too. And so
Mhm.
I feel that being in the position that I am as a recipient and as a founder of the Move for Life Foundation, I hope to provide that inspiration for others as well.
Mhm. Yeah, great. What about you? What's your sort of, how do you infuse being a recipient into the organization's mission, purpose, daily activities?
Well, I think it's a lived experience as a recipient. So going through that experience personally, I think is advantageous because you understand the the emotional side of what
Yeah.
transplantation really is. And hopefully what I like to do is try to take that emotion and those feelings and put them into, like throw them back into whatever Move for Life is doing. And whether or not it's making sure Jill gets across the lake safely, or that my team on the 1600-kilometer relay is doing exactly what they need to do. We're right on pace, and all the organizing that goes into these really large and complex events, because they're quite difficult to plan. And I think if you don't have that sort of investment in yourself, and that experience, maybe I wouldn't be as able to put forward that effort, because, well, let's face it, I've lived this experience and I've survived, and I just want to give back. And I have this incredible team of people that all want to do the same thing. And if we're going to do something, like I say sometimes, if we're going to be a monkey, we might as well be a gorilla. So let's go big on
Sure. That's great. So maybe, because we talked about this offline, Gray, a little bit, maybe you could share a little bit about knowing the emotional, you didn't say this, but exactly, but the emotional landscape of a recipient and how you put that into these events you guys are doing. And the more that I do these interviews and the more we as a group, World Transplant Athletes, talk to other recipients, the more uh, powerful this mental health and emotional health stuff is becoming. And we're starting to find ways to share this, I think, more readily and more easily. So maybe you can start with that, Gray. When you say putting in this emotional, you're understanding the emotions as a recipient into the events, maybe you can talk maybe one or two highlights of that. How do you try to put that into the events?
Well, listen, going through a transplant is definitely, it's a physical journey. That's for sure. It's your body is shutting down, but you are so aware of all of this. It's almost as if you're realizing that you are not your body, because your body is
Mm.
shutting down and you're watching it shut down. And so you have these emotions and these thoughts and ideas. And for me, it was a real moment in time where I knew that there was this separation between who I really am and what I
Mm.
really am, as compared to this vehicle that I travel throughout the world in. And so going through a transplant it's very, it's taxing, it's scary, it's not always, the path is not always clear, it's overwhelming, it's filled with highs and it's filled with like really low lows, and it just feels like getting on the other side of that, number one, is such a celebration, um, and getting to hopefully positively impact somebody else who has gone through that, or and is doing well now, or is going through that and is struggling, or has gone through that and isn't doing well now. If I can connect through what Move for
Hmm.
Life is
Yeah.
doing and the emotion that I put into it, hopefully, as you said, hopefully there's one person out there that says, hey, listen, that Jill is like really does some good stuff. Like, I want to do something. And it doesn't have to be swimming like some ridiculous distance. It could be just, hey, let's get up and let's start taking care of myself. And let me get outside and breathe deeply, get some fresh air in my lungs. And you know what? That feels good. I want to do that regularly. So I start moving a little bit more. And it's really just a celebration of life. And I think once you've gone through that, it's so much easier to pour yourself into something as amazing as what Move for Life has become.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe, Jillian, you can talk a little bit about some of the mental health things you've learned through all of your journeys.
Sure. Yeah, I would say I feel extremely fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, where I have a good understanding of how your physical health can really support your mental health. And I know that not everyone going through a transplant or needing a transplant or that's had a transplant comes from the same surroundings that I do. My husband is a personal trainer, and I've been with him for 16 years, and he's always been, prioritizing his health. And I know what that has done for him. And I've followed suit even before my transplant, not in the way that I do now, but I think that saying that, I just want to point out that being active and prioritizing my fitness and my health has really allowed me to get into the best mental space that I've ever been in. When I didn't have that, I can't say that I was really a happy person. I think there's a really huge connection between our mental health and our physical health, and taking that time every day or on a regular schedule I think it's essential for us, whether it's walking, swimming. It doesn't have to be, like Grace said, it doesn't have to be swimming like a psychopath or, anything too aggressive. But I think that if you can find something that you really enjoy doing, whatever that is, that keeps you active and keeps you moving, that you can pour some intention and being very mindful while you're doing it. I think that it's just so good for our health. And I can say from my experience that is what has propelled me to the place that I am today. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Like I think that I'm feeling healthy and doing good things and have good support and people around me. And a huge one is not to be afraid to ask for help and surround yourself with those supportive, uplifting people, because sometimes when things are big and scary or hard, it is hard to do that by yourself. And I've been really supported by others, and that has been a huge help in my life and mentally as well.
Yeah, so to your point, I was talking to a recipient 2 weeks ago. Her name's Brooke. She does a podcast called Bonus Years, and she doesn't really identify as an athlete per se, but she's a singer and an opera singer. And at that, it requires an incredible amount of physical effort. And so, that's her thing that she wants to do. And now she's developed, after 20 years, getting back to the point where she was when she was in her 20s, and now is starting to sing at similar or better levels. But she kind of identifies singing in her life is the thing that she does. So it's not just getting out there, going for walks or swims or runs or whatever it is. It's just that thing you're passionate about. Hopefully it's movement related, because that generally makes people happy, but it can be anything. And so singing came to mind because I talked to someone recently. So final question, and I'll start with you, Jillian, is what's next for Move for Life Foundation? Because you guys have some really cool 2 things behind you: a really good swim and the 1,600-kilometer bike ride, a team bike ride you guys did last summer. I wanted to participate with you, didn't work out. So what's next for Move for Life Foundation?
Yeah, so we've got some exciting things lined up this year. Of course, a huge focus for myself, Gray, and Benoit, and Sylvie, who is 2 other members of our team. We are going to be competing at the World Transplant Games in Perth next month. So we're busy training for that, excited to go. to represent Canada, and we're all swimmers, so we're excited to swim. And with that, that's taking, a big part of our focus and our energy at the beginning of this year. So what we're planning for the fall is, I'll say, a somewhat smaller event, but we're hoping that it will reach a lot of people just the way the last two events have. So we are planning a multi-city walking event in as many cities as we can find people to host the walks in their communities. And the whole purpose of this walk is we want to educate others about the importance of registering your wishes to become an organ donor, but also equally as important to talk to your family about your wishes to register and following through with those wishes. So our message this year is to talk to your family. And so we're planning this for October, and we're going to be shortly, once we get back from the games, we're going to start recruiting. We're going to say leaders to lead these walks in their community, and hope that we can spread more awareness and get lots of people walking on the same day in multi-cities to get active and provide some much needed education around the process of organ donation.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. What about Gray? What are your sort of next big goals for Move for Life?
Well, obviously, what Jill was just describing, what we're thinking about. So really excited about that one. I think it's a really important message, and I just want to come back to that for a little bit. It's we've spoken to hospital staff and that sort of thing in the past, and it's surprising to hear the number of times that somebody is a registered organ donor, but they haven't necessarily discussed that with their family.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, family can come in and they can override those donors' wishes if they choose to. And so learning that, we realize that it's very, very important for whoever decides to register to be an organ donor to have that discussion with their family, so that that is not something that happens. Because as we know, there's already a shortage of organs available. So it's a real big shame that there's an organ, or probably a number of organs, that someone would like to give, but there's a miscommunication between the family members, and so lives are directly affected. So I think it's a really good message to discuss, and that's what the walk really is about. It's giving an opportunity to have these discussions and to discuss having discussions with our family.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. What I like about that is so much, it sounds like a very startup sort of mindset that you've asked a lot of questions, identified a very specific problem. In that case, the problem is that someone who is registered interest in becoming a donor, should they pass early, hasn't yet expressed that wish with their family, which is important, because a family might have to make a very hard decision in a moment of difficulty of passing. And so if they're able to share that, then that family is able to execute on that person's wishes and then give another human the gift of life down the road. So you're identifying something very specific and small, but so incredibly important for lots of other people. So gosh, just the fact that you guys have identified that problem set alone is extremely impressive. So I'm just a huge fan, once again, of all the cool work you guys are doing as Move for Life Foundation. So any final thoughts for any current recipients or future recipients? And I'll go to Gray, and then I'll finish with Jillian.
Yeah, the road is never easy. It's not promised to be easy, but we can control, hopefully, our reaction to things, and hopefully we can develop a network of support around ourselves. And I found that's very important during some of the difficult times. And then when we're ready, I always think that it's a really good thing to find something that you like to do. Doesn't have to be what I do or what anybody else does, but something that you like to do to stay active because the healthier you are, just on the off chance that something does happen and you have a hiccup, a health hiccup, and you're then stronger to face that, and hopefully it doesn't become a large issue. I just think it's vitally important as a transplant recipient to remain healthy and strong and mindful of what we consume, whether it be food or just content and media. And I like to focus on and keep positive things around me. And I find that's very, very, very beneficial for me.
Thanks. Jillian, any final thoughts for any current or soon-to-be recipients?
Well, Gray stole everything that I was going to say. I have to second everything that he said. But to add to it, I suppose, or a little bit further, I guess, surrounding yourself with positive people and people that lift you up, and eliminating the negativity from your life has done wonders for me, not just because of my transplant, but overall has created a more positive and healthy environment to live in. And also, as Grace said, the transplant process is not necessarily easy. I know some kind of, get through that a little quicker than others. For some, it can be a really long road of a decline and recovery. I suppose the positive thing to look at in all of that is that if you can get through that and try to stay as present as you can in each moment, that will set you up to be a stronger version of yourself on the other side. And hopefully that will help you in your recovery and moving forward in life.
Great. Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Grace, so much for being on the show. So if you're out there, if you have a body with a new part, you are a World Transplant Athlete. Thanks, guys, so much.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.